Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I love seeing such a full room for this beautiful movie. My name is Dave Karger. I am the chief correspondent at Fandango. You are a very lucky audience tonight because you are here for the final Q&A that the two stars of this movie are doing the entire season. And I feel lucky to be here as well. So please welcome both Oscar-nominated actors, stars of The Danish Girl, Eddie Redmayne and Alicia Vikander. Can you believe it's the end of the award season for the two of you?
We were just saying, let's enjoy this even more than any other time.
I mean,
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
I spoke to the two of you the second week of September in the Toronto Film Festival when this movie had its premiere, and now we're here 5 months later. It's a joy to kind of bookend this whole process with the two of you. So let's go back to almost a year ago. You've just begun filming The Danish Girl, and you decide, or the movie company decides, to put out a photo of you, Eddie, as Lili, because you're about to start doing the location work for the film, and you want to make sure that the first impression that people have of you and this character is not some wide lens, blurry shot. So you put the shot out. But because of that, the movie is on all of our radar as a possible Oscar-contending film for a year from then. How did you guys both put that pressure out of your mind and focus on the task at hand, which was to make a great film?
You're so good at asking new questions. You are.
Oh, thank you.
But also, I need to say one thing about that photo, because that was the first image that came out for the public. And that was actually my photo that I referred to for the first couple of weeks that we rehearsed. I had done a lot of costume fittings and things, and I went to Eddie and I was like, why haven't I ever seen you as Lili properly? And I had only seen that photo, so I had the same kind of, I guess, wonder and expectation as everyone else. And of course I had seen him embody it totally, but it was such a big step the first time. I was actually doing a camera test, and I had been 5 minutes in the room without noticing that Eddie was in there.
Wow.
Before this red-haired woman turned around and I realized, well.
Were you trying to hide in plain sight and see if she wouldn't figure out who it was?
No, it was such a, do you know what, it was such a sort of delicate process those first days, because people quite often ask about the first time of finding Lili, but the amazing thing about this film is it was about 15 years in the making, and it took, I was attached to it for 4 years, and even in the sort of year or two of preparing, it was gentle steps of preparation. There was no sort of moment of really finding Lili. The whole process was a sort of it was a really minute steps to seeing if we could discover who she was. So there was never a sort of great revelatory moment, but certainly that photo, when it went out into the world, you forget that making films is such a personal thing, and you're in this intimate, what feels quite safe environment, and then suddenly you put an image out into the world, and then there's judgment, and it's real. So it was a scary thing.
Yeah. So let's remind people, as if they need to be reminded, you are still our reigning Best Actor Academy Award winner.
Not for long.
Not for long. I'm gonna milk it. So what is it like for you now to go to these award shows like the Critics' Choice Awards or the Screen Actors Guild Awards and see your co-star Alicia just take the spotlight?
It's pretty extraordinary because, and it is weirdly emotional actually being here at the end of this journey. Because from the moment, as I said, I'd been attached to this for a wee while, and then Tom called Alicia in for an audition, and I've never really experienced anything like it. We did the scene, which is the morning after the ball, and I was standing behind. I was reading, and Tom was standing behind the camera. And what Alicia did in that room was unlike anything I'd ever really experienced. It was incredibly moving, and it suddenly brought this film that had been in our producer Gail's world for 15 years.
Gail Mutrix.
It came intimately and intensely to life, and an old friend of mine, Donald Gleason, had worked with Alicia many years before on, a few years before, on Anna Karenina, and he had raved about how brilliant she was. And
Ex Machina.
And they worked together on Ex Machina, exactly. And it's just was one of the great experiences, because preparing to play a part, you prepare in a vacuum and you do it on film. You have many months of preparing, but then when it comes to it, you're actually just playing opposite the person. And this is a chamber piece. It really, in many ways, is a two-hander, and just it was a great gift getting to play opposite. So seeing all the acclaim is just wonderful.
And for you, Alicia, it's been this crazy thing. We've talked about this before, where you've been working quite steadily for the past 2 or 3 years, but for some reason, just with scheduling, all 5 of the movies came out in this calendar year of 2015. As you were waiting and just being, I'm sure, impatient for these films to come out, and now to look back and you have 2 BAFTA nominations in the same year and 2 Golden Globe nominations in the same year and a Screen Actors Guild Award and a Critics' Choice Award and an Oscar nomination. This has to be so far beyond anything you could have imagined.
Well, it is. And first of all, thank you, darling. Oh my God. Well, yes, it's been a whirlwind this last year, and I'm actually at the Golden Globes. I was able to have my parents there, and it was a bit funny. My mom actually mentioned, because of this fact, like you said, it's been a bit of a coincidence that some films that I've done over almost, some of them 3.5 years ago, came out last year. And my mom was like, yeah, it's a lot of, back home in Sweden, a lot of my friends was like, yeah, we had heard that Alicia had been out working now for a few years, but I mean, we never see anything. Is she actually doing anything? So I've just been away from my home country, but I mean, it's just been utterly wonderful to finally have. It's like this film. I'm so incredibly proud, and you get to reunite with your colleagues and with Eddie, who I did this film with, and means so much. Both the experience of making it and now it's a finished product. So it's been a wonderful time.
Could you each recall, there's so many beautiful moments and not a false note in this whole film. Can you each recall the one scene that you remember as being the toughest one to get right?
Good question.
Yeah, a few. Well, I have. I think that happens if I'm really engaged when I read a script, and I did fall in love with, like most people who had been close to the script, by it, and it was particularly one scene that stood out, and I think Lucinda Coxon had done our writer such a beautiful job with it. It's when Gerda comes back from her gallery opening in Paris, and she confronts and she meets Lili, and it's the scene where they've been on this journey together, and she's totally aware of what's happening, and she sees things for what they are, and that's also something that I really admire Gerda for. But it's a scene where she knows that suddenly things have changed. It's a change that has been inevitable, and it's happening, but it's that thing of being afraid of losing the person you love, of being close to one another. Suddenly she says, we used to do these things together, and she also finally kind of confronts and opens up with emotions of telling her emotional truth, which is, I want my husband back, and also the kind of guilt in saying that, knowing what the truth is, knowing that she's with Lili, who's standing in front of her. And I think that complexity in that scene, I got so moved by it. So then you treasure that scene, and I even put a mark in my calendar of that date we were going to shoot, and I'd like build up my anxiety of making it throughout the shoot. But also, it ends up always being those scenes that are the most exciting and terrifying to do.
How about you?
I think for me, there was, in preparing for the film, a lot of my research was meeting trans women and trying to relate contemporary experience to what Lili's story was almost 100 years ago, and checking, verifying that the scenes that were in the film still felt authentic. And one trans woman here in Los Angeles, actually, who was incredibly generous with her story to educate me, told me how before she had come out, her favourite day of the year was Halloween, because that meant that she could get dressed up as her true gender, be herself without scrutiny or without. And she described going to a club as a woman in Los Angeles and being in a corner in the dark, hiding, and this man coming over to her and sort of hitting on her. And for her, the way in which she described this extraordinary mixture of fuel, adrenaline, and excitement of being seen for who she was, mixed with the utter fear that this man, the violence that might occur or the discrimination that might occur if he saw her for who she was at that time, would have been that combination of emotions. And it was something that I think Lucinda had caught so well in that ball scene. And when someone has given you with extraordinary generosity that experience, relayed it to you, you felt a sense of responsibility to get it right in that scene. So I think for me that was probably the most complicated.
That is an electric sequence to me. That I just even thinking about that moment is so great. Okay, I'm going to have each of you embarrass the other. For each of you, what is your favorite moment of the other one's performance?
Oh, I can actually say it because we just talked. We didn't.
I know
we
you
were just
were.
talking about just us. There's a bit when the curtain is dividing them in bed, and Alicia says, "I put my hand against the curtain and go, that was you and that." She goes, "It was not long ago we were married," and I said, "No, that was you and I now." And she goes, "I know it was, but actually it was you and me." And she taps my finger very, very delicately, and I found it it came out of nowhere when we were shooting it, and it was. I always find that very, very moving.
Well, I mean, you helped me in that scene. I was terrified of my favorite scene that I had, and it was easy because of you in that scene. I didn't have to do much, so I remember how wonderful feeling it is to work with someone who's like taking on a new route every time. So that one, but it's also, I remember when we both saw the film in full the first time at the world premiere in Venice. We were kind of
terrified, by the
way. Terrified. We're like,
you don't want to see a film for the first time in an audience.
Like
Gripping each other's hands.
So we were sitting there, and suddenly, as an actor, you're invited, even me, to see scenes that I weren't in, and that I read. And I remember it's that scene when Lili goes to see this dancer in Copenhagen, and that was one of my favorite scenes, and I had never seen it before, and it totally got to me. And it's that suddenly it was so pure that it was just two women looking at each other, and I think you were utterly amazing in that, and I was just grasped by it.
Okay, so you all submitted questions before the screening, and I want to race through a bunch because you had a lot of good ones. This is from Keely Field. Raise your hand, Keely. Hi, Keely. Keely had a couple questions. I'm going to ask you your number 2 question. Number 2 question is for you, Eddie. Is there an actor or actress that you admire that you would like to work with the most, and why?
Oh, so many. So, do you know what? I was lucky enough to meet Marion Cotillard last year, and there are a couple of actors and actresses that you see a film.
She's one of my favorites.
We'll fight you for
cool. She's so cool. I met her in real life.
There's something about, I don't know, I saw La Vie en Rose, and I remember leaving that film going, God, we might as well all give up because that is so staggering. So I think she's probably top of that list.
Great. Alicia, this is a question for you from Delilah. Raise your hand, Delilah. Oh, well, we can't see you because there's tall men in front of you. But we hear you. This is for you, Alicia. Who did you study acting with? And what do you feel contributed most to your success as an actress?
I hope that I think it's all about every person that you meet along the way. I think acting is trying to gain as much experience, and I think that's why it's the wonderful thing of aging and kind of gather more. I still feel young, and I want to learn more. But then, I guess I was actually I was very jet lagged this morning and woke up about 4, and it was a beautiful day. So I walked outside and had a what you call hike here in Los Angeles.
Otherwise known as a walk.
And I was on the phone with a woman called Lisa Langset, who was my first director, who I made 2 feature films back home in Sweden with, and that I really hope I'm going to work with again. And she has in one way become, she was the one who, she saw me and dared to trust me and with work, and I was terrified, but she kind of held my hand, and that was the beginning in a way. And it was so. I have a lot to give to that woman, and I'm so grateful that she's been with me along my way.
Great. Here's a question for the two of you from Colton. Hi, Colton. Colton says, as actors just starting out in your careers, how did you find the fine line of making choices in your roles that were authentic enough, yet also bold enough to set you apart? And that's got to be hard, especially when you're just beginning.
What I would say to that is, for me, it was through making mistakes. And I remember I did a film early on, and I was playing American, and I was so excited to have got this job and terrified. We were shooting on big sets in New York. There were amazing actors involved, and you could see sort of money everywhere, and that sort of pressure of that. And suddenly there was a camera about 3 inches away from me, and I was so terrified and so convinced that I was going to get fired for having a bad accent that basically I played an accent. Now, my performance in that film is so awful because you just see me trying not to get fired, ever since then, when I saw that back, I was like, never. I'd rather get fired than do something really boring and beige and sort of really limited again. So I suppose I always just try and surprise yourself a wee bit.
You have to remind me, because I heard the question is something that has been really...
Well, when you're just starting out, how do you kind of walk that line between having your performances feel authentic but also be bold and different to set you apart?
Oh, I kind of have that fear still yet. I think it's a very good question. Someone asked me what I think I have learned, if I have learned anything. Now I have made a couple of films, and in the beginning I was so terrified of making mistakes, like you said, that I was pushing myself, and you know that it's such time limit, and you know that you think that everyone's looking at you and judging you, and you want everything so bad. And it was actually an actor I worked with, like, I don't know, my 2nd or 3rd year in, and he did that thing of suddenly he just stopped, and this was a very famous actor that I looked up, and he was like, I just don't feel this, I'm very nervous, can we just take 5 minutes? And everyone just stopped, and he was like, if everyone just got quiet, and then we can continue again. And that's the thing of daring to actually speak up and say that, you know what, I haven't really found this yet, I don't feel really comfortable. That was a big step. I was like, wow, I felt so lonely in that fear. And I think that's also something that you learn, that if you can share that, suddenly it kind of becomes a bit easier, and you can kind of hold hands and laugh about it a bit, hopefully.
Here's a question from Preston, who's 10 years old. Where are you, Preston? Oh, you're right here in the front. Hi.
Hi.
I'm not really sure you should have been watching this movie. But you're here. And I loved your question. It's simple, but it's also, I think, very important. I'm going to ask it for both of you. What inspired you to become an actor?
I think it comes down to kind of the essence of just, I love to act, and I love film, and I love theater, and the essence come from, it's hard to know a moment when I don't think I chose to love what I do. It's just part of who I am and my personality, and I had a mum who, she is an actress, so I was kind of, without knowing, I was introduced to theater and storytelling from a very young age, and I was back there in the wing and looked up and watched it, and I think in one way that's the inspiration started then, and it was her and her colleagues, and then people that I met along the way.
And you?
I think for me, I was probably your age, and I was at school in London, and they were auditioning for a theatre version of Oliver, the musical. and in Oliver the Musical, there are about 700 children, and I managed to somehow blag one of those parts as workhouse boy number 40, and the best thing about it was I got to leave school every day. And I still remember the absolute confidence of walking out going, so I'm leaving class now, I'm off to the West End. I was probably really irritating. But the being on those theatres behind the scenes at the London Palladium, these sort of dark, dim lit, very romantic, extraordinary places, that's for me where I got the bug.
So just to be clear, your message to 10-year-old Preston is to drop out of school. Okay, right. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Sorry.
I want to end with one last question, which is, now that so many people have seen this movie in so many different countries and communities of all age ranges, what is your favorite thing that someone has said to you after seeing this movie?
I think it's... Well, we met a lot of people in preparing for this film, a lot of people from the transgender community, and for me, preparing for Gerda, I met a lot of people who were friends and families, loved ones, partners of people transitioning, and I think those personal relationships that you make with these people who gave so much of themselves and open up about their personal experiences and their relationships and stories. When I had a woman at the premiere who had traveled for 5 hours, I had read one of her books called My Husband is a Woman Now, and I had just called up a few months earlier while we were filming to tell her that I just really wanted to tell her thank you, and I was like, hi, I'm Alicia Vikander, I'm an actress, and I'm making this film, and I was introduced to your book, and I felt such a connection with my idea of my character, with your experience, even though it's a contemporary one, and she did something that I know a lot of people to you also did. She was like, well, hello, Alicia. She said, please ask me anything. And we ended up having a 3-hour conversation on the phone. And I had never met this woman. And I continued to have a relationship and been emailing with her when she arrived and saw it at the premiere. And she came there with her spouse, which she's still with. And she felt like it translated what her story was. That was, I think, that's also why this film will always be. I have a very personal relationship to many films, but this will be special because it's actual human connections I've met with people, and that this film could be part of translating part of their story has been pretty cool.
Great.
I mean, really similar to Alicia. Last year with The Theory of Everything, when you were promoting that film, it was about, or making that film, it was about what Stephen and Jane and their family thought. Those were the people whose opinion you cared about. And similarly, exactly as Alicia was saying, there was a couple here in Los Angeles called Cadence and Trista who, when I was preparing for the film, really opened their hearts in the most extraordinary way. And whilst this isn't their story specifically, there were so many elements of it which they talked me through. And when they came to the premiere, similarly, it was about, I was so nervous, I was a wreck. But their kindness and generosity towards the film was certainly the most, I think, perhaps the most rewarding aspect for us.
I love it. Well, I speak for the whole room when I say thank you and congratulations on this beautiful film. Eddie Redmayne and Alicia Vikander.
Thank you so much.